5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
This is the Culture Clash.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Welcome, everybody. Happy St. Patrick's Day. We are live here with the Culture Clash. You know, guys, we got a ton to talk about. We got some big breaking news that is unfortunate. We're going to dive right into it. First, let me introduce, of course, my co-founder of the Fandom Podcast Network, my tag team partner, the one and only Mr. Kevin Reitzel.
Welcome to Mando Watch, our Friday night ritual here. Excited. We got a great guest returning as well to talk some Last of Us. We're going to talk about the last 3 episodes. And it was kind of a bummer going into it. One of our favorite actors in one of our favorite movies and TV series has passed away. But before we get to that, let's introduce our guest.
Yep, returning to the Culture Clash. He's been with us for the whole Last of Us ride. He is obviously a fungal expert in real life. I'm just going to say it, but it is always a pleasure here to have the wonderful and great John Mosby joining us on the Culture Clash. John, welcome. I wish we were opening the show under better circumstances. We got some breaking news about 3 hours ago. An actor very much known in fandom circles. A lot of people, I think, really got to know him either via The Wire, possibly through the John Wick films. I really got to know him through the TV show Fringe. Lance Riddick passed away at the age of 60 from natural causes. This was pretty much shock. He's been in a lot of things. I think the most recent thing I remember him in outside of the John Wick films was he recently did that Resident Evil series for Netflix, where he was one of the main leading roles in that. But this is an amazing actor, much beloved and respected actor, Kevin.
Yeah, I remember seeing him in several things. I think Fringe as well. But to me, he's Sharon in John Wick. I know he's had much, prominent roles and, of course, television series and stuff like that. But the huge John Wick fan in me, I just love his character, and I've always loved the friendship that his character had with John Wick in the first 3 films. And I love the fact that he got to shoot some guys with John Wick too. There at the hotel, and he's been doing press for John Wick 4, which is coming out next week. Exactly. And he had some appearances that were set up, including Kelly Clarkson and a bunch of other ones. And it's really, really sad.
It is very sad. But John, you put an article out on Echo Chamber as well, but can you, where was your first introduction to Lance Riddick and your thoughts on him?
He is one of those performers where you sit back and you go, when was the first time that I saw him? I mean, I know there's a lot of people talking about going back to The Wire and things like that, but he's just always been there, hasn't he? He has this kind of this specific gravity. People have been talking about gravitas. He has that voice, that presence. The don't mess with me attitude. Apparently, he was a really nice guy, but that was the persona he always managed, to bring to the screen. Most recently, I think I saw him on Bosch on Amazon, and I'm also a fan of the Horizon Forbidden West that I was playing recently, and he plays the character of Silence in that. He's such a versatile actor. He was a bit like James Earl Jones is. You recognize the voice, you recognize the face, and you immediately know, don't mess with this guy, whatever he does.
Yeah, he always had a gravitas to him when he was on screen. He wasn't one of these guys who who had to show his and take up the space of the screen. He was there and you just knew it. And he just had that kind of presence about him, like, okay, Lance Riddick's on the screen, something's going to happen. It's just, I'm kind of speechless by it because it really did come as a shock. I loved him, Kevin, in the John Wick films as shown. Obviously a big supporter of John Wick in the film. And of course, not only that, but an excellent pet sitter.
This is true. Yeah. I love John Wick doesn't talk a lot, and neither does Sharon, does his character a little bit, but he's loyal to T, and he really respects John Wick, and he was the one that went to John Wick's house after it was blown up in the second one, and when he had to call him back in, and Wick respects him. Speaking of Wick, Mr. Keanu Reeves released a statement with director Chad Stahelski. Says on Friday, following news of Reddick's death, Reddick appeared in all 4 films of the Wick franchise as hotel concierge Sharon, and goes on to say, and he was also slated to appear in the upcoming spin-off film Ballerina. Quote, "We are deeply saddened and heartbroken at the loss of our beloved friend and colleague Lance Reddick," the pair said in their statement. Quote, "He was the consummate professional and a joy to work with. Our love and prayers are with his wife Stephanie, his children, family, and friends. We dedicate the film to his loving memory. We will miss him dearly." And Lionsgate also released a statement saying the world of Wick would not be what it is without Lance Reddick and the unparalleled depth he brought to Sharon's humanity and unflappable charisma. Lance leaves behind an indelible legacy and hugely impressive body of work, but we will remember him as our lovely, joyful friend and concierge. We're stunned and heartbroken, and our deepest condolences go to his beloved family and his fans all around the world.
Yeah, it's a tough loss. I think this is an actor I think universally beloved. I don't know of anybody who's either an actor who's worked with him or a fan of seeing him in a movie who's ever spoken ill will towards Lance Reddick. Yeah. And I think it's a loss for fandom. He's for a while he was kind of one of that guys where it's like you see him pop up, and then over the last several years people have come to know him more, and it's a shame. Even one of the shows we're going to be talking about tonight, The Last of Us, he has a tie to that. Anna Torv, who of course was in the early episodes of The Last of Us, was his co-star on Fringe. So
Fringe.
It's a loss, but we wanted to make the time because I think Lance Reddick deserves to be appreciated and recognized, and I think a lot of people out there do. But if you are, for whatever reason, not familiar with his work, there's so much. Go out there, see the John Wick films, watch The Wire, watch Fringe, and just experience Lance Reddick because he was a phenomenal actor. But with that, Kevin, it is time to move on to why we are here. And of course, this is live Culture Clash special episodes. And of course, spoiler alert ahead, because not only are we going to be talking about The Mandalorian's latest episode, but we are going to be diving as well later on in the show to the final 3 episodes of The Last of Us. But we are here to begin Mando Watch 2023, Season 3, Chapter 19, The Converts. Kevin, I have a question for you. Was this an episode of The Mandalorian, or was it an episode of something else?
We will touch on that. What's interesting about this too is you always hear these leaks about the running time of this of the upcoming episode, because that's been a huge talking point with fans, and I'm sure you know of this as well, John, when it comes to other shows. But one of the things that fans for The Mandalorian wanted, let's give us some longer episodes here. How about making them all an hour? And there was a rumor that this show was going to be just about an hour. And I think our friends over at Star Wars Stuff Podcast, David Lozano, he had posted a kind of like a little spoiler note about that. And I said, I'll believe it when I see it. And sure enough, when I started it, I paused it like, oh, it is an hour. Not an hour of everything that we wanted, but it was still quite interesting. So, yeah.
Now, John, this is the first time we've had you on to talk anything Star Wars. And I know, Kevin, I think you had a question you wanted to ask John as well.
Yeah, John, I'm kind of curious. First of all, I know obviously you and I met through our Highlander fandom, obviously, and you wrote an awesome Highlander book, of course. And so I wanted to kind of, I know where you are with Doctor Who and stuff like that, but I want to kind of know how has Star Wars affected your life? I'm not expecting you're like the biggest Star Wars fan like Kyle and I are, but it's had to affect you in some way.
Nobody's as big a fan of Star Wars than you are, so I would never. Yeah, I'm not worthy in that department. But no, I'm of the generation. Despite my youthful looks, I remember the original Star Wars coming out. I remember it being in cinemas in England for like almost 6 months. It feels like one of the distinct memories I've got is that almost everybody I knew went to see Star Wars for their birthday, to the point that one of my friends wasn't allowed to go and see Star Wars again because his mother said, "You've seen it too many times already." But it informed me. I got the Star Wars figures. I grew up with Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi. So I'm an original trilogy guy. It goes back that far. It's one of those things that as a professional film critic for a long time, it was one of those staples of my childhood that I was glad to see coming back in various forms, with further films. To varying effect. I'm not a huge fan of the most recent trilogy. I think for reasonable reasons. I don't hate it or loathe it as much as some. I don't love it as much as others. But I think it's a wide and wonderful galaxy to explore. And I'm hoping that, as we're seeing now, that we don't keep having to go back to this kind of Skywalker side to make it Star Wars. There is a big universe out there full of really interesting stories. And I've always said it's so universe. There's such a big canvas of the styles to show the stories. So there's room for Andor. There's room for Boba Fett. There's room for the Mandalorian. I prefer my science fiction with a little bit of darkness and a little bit of grit. But having said that, the Star Wars is the pinnacle of the Saturday morning, episodic style. There's nobody that's really done it any better than that in my lifetime. I think it's a unique style. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But for me, the Mandalorian fills a niche. It's not my favorite niche, but absolutely understand why it's absolutely catnip for some people. So yeah, more and more and diverse, that works for me.
Some great thoughts there, John, and we're gonna dive into your Mandalorian thoughts here much deeper here shortly. But Mr. Reitzel, before we go any further, would you care to give the rundown of Chapter 19, The Convert?
I did want to have a little fun real quick before I do that, and I always like to share my Mandalorian this week's non-Star Wars TV movie poster spoilers without context. I always like to have a little fun with here. And I picked Drop Zone with Wesley Snipes, Independence Day, that famous scene, Batman 89, where the Batwing shoots up towards the moon and comes down. Remember that movie Robots? Yeah, a lot of droids in this one. And if you think about it, the water that they jump into is kind of like a hot tub time machine because he's trying to go back into time. And of course, Total Recall with the Mind Flayer at the end, and the recent Welcome to the Club was obvious on the nose there for there. So I thought I'd have a little fun there. But anyway, so let's go ahead and let's get into the episode plot synopsis here, guys. All right, Chapter 19, The Convert. As Din Djarin recovers, he and Bo-Katan depart Mandalore, though Bo-Katan withholds the Mythosaur's existence from him. Upon returning to Kalevala, they are attacked by Imperial TIE Squadron ships who destroy Bo-Katan's home and are forced to retreat. Meanwhile, on Coruscant, Dr. Pershing receives a pardon by the New Republic, but is startled to find that Elia Kane among the amnesty program recipients. Kane agrees to assisting Pershing in his efforts to continue his cloning research, which has been outlawed by the Republic. They sneak aboard a decommissioned Imperial-class Star Destroyer to steal the necessary materials, but Kane betrays Pershing to the Republic's lawkeepers and later secretly sabotages the mind-wiping procedure used on him, significantly worsening its effect. Din and Bo-Katan arrive at the secret Mandalorian enclave, where Din presents the armor with a sample of the living waters as proof of his redemption. Because she also bathed in the waters and, of course, kept her helmet on, Bo-Katan is welcome to the enclave as well.
This is the way.
This is the way, yes. Let's get some instant reactions here, guys, to the Convert. Let's go ahead and start with you, John. What's your first reaction to this? Oh yeah, let's get you up here. I'm sorry.
I there we go. Put in my review, and there we go. Hi. It's one of those episodes that demonstrates a little bit of I'm sorry, I'm flipping my pencil around here. demonstrates what Star Wars can do in all its sort of shapes and hues, but it does it in one episode, and everything it does is perfectly fine. The Saturday morning adventure aspect is there. That the big space battle at the start of it is great. It's exactly what Star Wars is, and there's the very much the night feel, the Knights of the Round Table feel to everything to do with the Mandalorian itself. But the big weight of the episode, as you mentioned, feels like the other series, Andor. People have been saying it's the Andor-lorian this week because it's so it's such a shift that I find it hard to imagine that people will have felt the same about the episode all the way through it. I get the feeling that people will like one aspect of it a lot more than others, rather than liking the whole thing. The conspiracy angle, the kind of Andor angle on it works really well, but for me it feels very much like the show doesn't know what it wants to be, and it's great to put a few feelers out in one direction or another. But sooner or later, people have got to have an idea of what to expect from your show. And what I felt from this is that that the people who are making it don't quite know what show they're on at any given point. It's fine if you want to be the action figure show and and the daring do on the Saturday morning, but I don't think an Andor type episode in the middle of it is going to work as well. I know lots of people who like Andor, people like The Mandalorian, but it's a bit like having your two favorite meals together. And sometimes that's a phenomenally bad idea. You can like this meal, but you don't put Jell-O and potatoes on the same plate.
It's like you can have pizza. It's like you can have pizza and then you can have pineapple, but it's not good to necessarily put them together.
No.
I will put my pineapple and pizza together plenty of times. Thank you.
Kyle, your instant reaction thoughts.
I feel like maybe they trolled us a little bit here. We get the opening action of with Mandalorian and Bo-Katan and the Empire showing up, and then it's like, no, now we're going to take that hard right turn because we missed that left turn to Albuquerque, and now we're into a Andor type episode, and it's almost too jarring in the tone of the episode changes so quickly. Now it's very interesting to see what they're doing, what they did with Dr. Pershing and Elia Kane, and I think that's going to set up something for later in the season. I think Moff Gideon's going to be back involved. I get it, but to have that and then end back with the Coven and Bo-Katan and Din showing up, it just felt really kind of strange. And like I said, you would expect a certain thing from The Mandalorian, and they gave us this left field episode. And again, it wasn't the fact that they had it, it's the fact of how they did it, because they pull you in with that first 10 minutes and then give you back to it the last 10 minutes. But in the middle, you're like, I'm not sure what I'm feeling right now. This is not what I'm expecting from my Mandalorian episodes. And I got to tell you what, they really make, I'm kind of, the way I watched this, the New Republic felt just as bad as the Empire in its own way by the end of the episode.
Yeah.
So I'm like, are we shooting the New Republic today, guys?
What's up, John?
That's exactly the politics, of Andor, which is that everybody's compromised to a point, and this seems to be going into that very much, and it's a perfectly valid, and I think it did it very well and quite subtly, and I love the visuals and I love the kind of the conspiratorial angle of it. No problem with what they did, but it's, as you say, it's like having two bookends and having something completely different in the middle. You've got to Pershing, Pen Pershing becomes a pen pusher, and as you say, we take a Din Djarin left turn into something completely different.
I see what you did there, John. Pen pushing becomes a pen pusher. I like that. Okay, so I enjoyed the episode, but yeah, it was a little jarring because and David Lozano, you were right. You did give the tease that this was going to be almost an hour episode, but it wasn't the hour episode that we were expecting, because I was like, oh, great, an hour episode. and most of it, 40 minutes of it, goes to Mr. Pershing and his adventure, so to speak. But I kind of get the feeling they were writing some stuff in that was probably meant for other shows that were supposed to happen, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But John, you mentioned something about The Mandalorian in your recent article that I've been hearing fans kind of talk about, and you teased it a little bit with your opening statement. And if you don't mind, I'm going to read what you said here. It says, all in all, there's plenty of different elements to like and applaud in The Mandalorian, a consistent high-profile entry and ratings winner for the Disney Plus platform. But there's a lack of core identity about it all, as if every episode is cautiously looking around for approval. Some of those elements are superficial and some have depth. But so far, it seems to be a show that doesn't quite know what it wants to be beyond a feather in the cap helmet of the FX team. Given that we don't know whether it's Pedro Pascal, Lateef Crowder, or Brendan Wayne under the helmet at any given time, it would be nice to think that the show creators could decide what they want under the bonnet of the show themselves. And I was actually a little relieved to read this, John, because as much as we're enjoying it, it's great for the eyes. We're getting a lot of callbacks to other Star Wars stuff. We're getting some really nice fan service here. But it seems like what's happening in the current time frame, 5 or 6 years after Return of the Jedi, and the bigger picture that we've been teased with so much, it seems now, of, the Grand Admiral Thrawn and cloning, they don't seem to be quite getting to the point. And then on top of this, they throw this episode in that shows that the New Republic isn't all that great right now. We get this great feeling at the Return of the Jedi, at the end of Return of the Jedi, the Empire is gone. But now we're getting kind of a reality check thrown in our face. We're not really seeing our heroes be heroes. There just seems to be a lot of stuff that's kind of in the fire, but none of that's really being consumed and eaten afterwards. That's, put together not well, but I guess consistently. Is that fair to say?
That's my take on it. It feels, every time I watch it, it feels like the writer's room had a writing contest, and whoever won that week gets to tell that story, and then the person wins the next week. It could be completely different. Now there's a lot to applaud about the idea that a show can tackle lots of different themes. I mean, we've talked before, I think you and I, the fact that things like Quantum Leap it was a format where you could tell quite dark story one week and a comedic story the next. But I think within a show that's like The Mandalorian, it's much less easy to do that. There are all these stories to be told, and all of them are valid. But if a person doesn't know kind of what to expect from a show to this extent, and I think that The Mandalorian is such an action adventure, Knights of the Round Table, samurai, and frankly, as I've said a few times, a huge commercial for action figures. I don't think that if you do a sudden screeching left turn into socio-political extremism in the aftermath of a rebellion, I don't know whether you can still tell that story, but whether you can tell it to the same audience in the same 50 minutes or so. That's my problem. I think it's exactly as you've nailed. There's nothing wrong with the show. It feels a niche, but it feels like it's a coin toss every single week for what type of show it wants to be. And it feels at the moment like modern Star Wars is a little like that. We're going to have a Boba Fett show. Great, wonderful. Yeah, we're going to bring in a key character from another one and tell a really important part of his story in a completely different series. Then we're going to come back and we're going to get back into the night side of it again, but we're immediately going to take a detour into something like Andor. It doesn't feel like that the people behind it have enough confidence to say what they have works. It's all right not to get every single fan on board for something. Some people will like this, some people will like that. It feels at the moment like everybody's running around going, yeah, let's try that. Let's do this. I really wish they had confidence to stick with, explore whatever slice, because there's so much you can do with a Saturday morning serial, and there's so much you can do with a socio-political story. You don't have to keep jamming them together so the audience doesn't know what's going on.
Good point,
Kyle.
Kyle.
I want to interject something to John when he's talking about this, because
Mhm.
I'm not so sure this is a Star Wars problem. This might be a Disney problem, because there's a lot of Disney stuff. When you look at Marvel, you look at some other Disney product, they're kind of having the same problems right now. They can't really decide on a direction. And I'm just wondering if that's been because of the chaos from Chapek and switching back to Iger and things like that. And we're seeing that fallout from that, or if there's some other things behind it, some edicts that are going on that we don't know about. But yeah, it really feels it's like they're trying to write everything to please every kind of fan, instead of just trying to focus on this is the kind of fan who likes this show. Let's keep it in that lane. So I do think that's a very interesting
just
point.
a little bit more. Yeah, just a little bit.
Now, Kevin, I wanted to talk about the cast a little bit in this episode, because we had a couple of people who haven't really had much time to shine in the previous seasons of The Mandalorian, but they were the stars of this episode, and that is we have, of course, Dr. Penn Pershing, and we have Elia Kane, played by Katie M. O'Brien, who we've seen in a few things lately, Kevin.
Yeah, definitely. And, obviously we've seen her in Ant-Man, Quantumania. And also she's next to that very handsome Imperial officer right there.
Wait. I heard it did not end well for that Imperial officer. He might not remember who he is anymore.
This is true. Yeah, you got sent to the spice mines of Kessel. But yeah, I got a chance to meet Katie O'Brien actually last year, right at the beginning of Star Wars Celebration in Anaheim. They had a nice event at the Scum and Villainy Cantina there on Hollywood Boulevard, and she and a fellow actor were honored as honorary members of the 501st, and they came and hung out and hung with us, and she was really cool and posed for pictures and stuff. So yeah, and it was nice to see her come back from the second season of Mandalorian and have a good part though. But yeah, then we got Mr. Pershing here. We knew we were going to see him come back, Kyle, but we weren't quite sure exactly where Dr. Penn Pershing was going to be, played by Omid Abtahi, brilliantly played. But I want to give a special shout out to him for a particular reason. He is the reason why Star Wars costuming, now you can wear glasses because they are canon, and some of us need to wear glasses. Your thoughts on the, I guess, these performances of these two characters, John?
Yeah, I mean, he clearly a wonderful. I say, and the Andor sort of comparisons keep coming in, but the script here and the performances really work in a subversive way. It's a story of somebody who was on the wrong side, and the interesting thing about the episode is you're not 100% sure if he's well, we know he's not happy, but whether he's converted, as it were, to a better cause, or whether he's just trying to basically get away with doing what he was doing before and telling himself it's for the right people this time. It's nice when a script comes together and an actor comes together to be able to kind of do that multi-layered thing where two people can watch the episode and come to a slightly different conclusion about people's motivations. I liked what the episode had to say, and the way that the characters were allowed to kind of voice those gray areas. Quite often we're told what to think, and I don't think there's a character in this episode that we come away with and we're completely sure of what their motivations are. It's not a black and white thing. The motivations are a little bit clouded. We can criticize them a bit. The politics in the episode are incredibly double standard and mercurial. So yeah, lots of great performance. I enjoyed it as an episode. I just felt that the pieces of the episode didn't stick together that well. But the central side of it, I thought was a very good story. It's just one I expected to see in a different show.
I think that's a very fair assessment, and we're going to get into that a little bit more. But Kevin, I hear you've acquired some Jedi holocrons, and they were full of trivia.
Yes, this is true. Got some trivia here for you guys. So the place where Dr. Pershing is speaking with the people of Coruscant, of course, is the Opera House, where Anakin met with Palpatine at the beginning of Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. You can learn not from a Jedi. Oh, yes. Very creepy episode, very creepy scene, but done very, very well. Yeah, that was like the full-on seduction, hardcore press that Palpy was putting on Anakin there. I mean, he was just like, I got you. Contrast with this live-action Coruscant at the Emperor's height in Andor 2022. And this is the first time Coruscant is shown in live action after the fall of the Empire in episode 4, Return of the Jedi. Episode 6, Return of the Jedi in 1983. The keyboard on Dr. Pershing's desk is a modified Commodore C64 or possibly a VIC-20 home computer, first released in 1982. Kyle, did you pick up on this?
I wasn't really looking for it at the time, but are you sure they didn't come and raid the Raider Nerd Cave for their Commodore 64 keyboard?
Damn it! This is the first time that the planet Coruscant is referred to as the center of the galaxy, is defined as an ecumenopolis. If I'm pronouncing that right. You hear that when he's watching the little thing in bed, and you hear the girl's voice talking about that. So that was pretty cool. While Dr. Pershing and Elia are walking through the entertainment plaza, the music heard in the background is carnival-styled version of March of the Resistance from the sequel trilogy, which has been used as the theme for the New Republic in other episodes of the series. Elia Kane, who led Dr. Pershing astray, was previously seen during season 2 as a communications officer on Moff Gideon's spaceship, and of course was Pershing who wanted to experiment on Grogu in season 1. The 38-minute Coruscant subplot. Do we really want to call it a subplot now? It's kind of the main plot of Chapter 19 was revised by David Filoni and Jon Favreau from their canceled TV show Rangers of the New Republic, which Lucasfilm producer Kathleen Kennedy suggested in 2021 would be absorbed into The Mandalorian. We knew this was going to happen. This is not necessarily confirmed, but it's pretty much evident. John, does that seem to make sense? The reason why we got this, I guess, kind of shoehorned in so we know what else is happening in the bigger part of the Republic and the galaxy.
I think that I get the feeling there is probably I'm probably wrong on this, but there's like a central meeting room where everybody kind of pitches their ideas a little bit, and people say, "Oh no, can we use that there? And can we use that there?" A little bit like perhaps the Marvel, a blueprint of saying this would work better if we do that there. We can't use that there, so let's use it here. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But I suspect because things do change, particularly at Disney, that things do get moved around the chessboard a little bit, I think.
Yeah, because the last part I have on the trivia says this means the future chapters are very likely to include Genevieve O'Reilly as Mon Mothma, and of course Rosario Dawson as Ahsoka Tano, but not Gina Carano as Cara Dune, even though the Rangers of the New Republic was originally her own series spinoff. So that's what I got for trivia, Kyle.
So before we get into our topics, Kevin, I know we don't really have any orbital bombets for this week's episode because we got so much to talk about, but I have a quick 10-second one. Coruscant. I think it's becoming a problem, and I think there is truthfully only one solution for it. Just saying, nuke it from orbit is the only way
Back away
to get rid of all the politicians.
Well, we get a little shot.
What I did be really sorry. Okay.
Gotta say they have pretty nice apartments for being in a program to be rehabilitate former Imperials being rehabilitated. I think that's pretty cool. All right, well, let's go ahead and let's get into Kyle. Let's go ahead and get us into the next segment here.
Okay, absolutely. So let's get into some of our topics of The Mandalorian. Now, we kind of touched upon this when we talked about the actors, but Kevin, dive us a little bit more into Dr. Penn Pershing and Elia Kane.
Yeah, we want to. Let me be honest with you. I want to go into this subplot / main plot first because I really want to dive into the Mandalorian stuff, but I do want to touch on this here. So, arguably, the main cast member in Episode 3 is Omid Abtahi, who reprises his role of Imperial cloning scientist Dr. Penn Pershing. Returning guest star in the form of Katie O'Brien, who appeared as Moff Gideon's former communications officer, Elia Kane. The majority of the episode shifts to focus Dr. Penn Pershing, a former Imperial scientist who took a great deal of interest in Grogu in seasons 1 and 2, now living in Coruscant. Pershing is part of a rehabilitation program to allow ex-Imperials the chance to live peacefully in the New Republic. However, he still has desire to continue his research into cloning, something that could get him into trouble indeed, which we did see. So I find this interesting that it is nice to get back to the center of the universe, so to speak, with Coruscant. And, you know, to kind of see what's going on, and the fact that there is ex-Imperials that are, you know, brought in to, you know, get rehabilitated and maybe, you know, help out the New Republic, you know, and, you know, if you know your history, John, and I know you do, that there was an Operation Paperclip after World War II, where the United States took a bunch of Nazi scientists to help develop their help develop what the Nazis were doing, which was rockets and space and all that kind of stuff, weaponry as well. A little bit different here, but obviously someone, Elia Kane, is not necessarily in the up and up. I want to get your kind of thoughts on this program here. And where do you think Elia's up to? What's the big picture for her?
I mean, that's the interesting thing. I was saying earlier, we don't 100% know at this point what the motivations are. She's not exactly doing what either side would particularly want the way we perceive it. We don't know whether she's just shutting up. Stuff that she does at the end is just basically to cover her tracks. We don't know. We know that the agenda is not a good one, but we don't know quite who her puppet masters are. I love the fact that the episode kind of goes to the fact that the Republic, for all that they are the good guys in the movies, are more on a more realistic scale. You know, rebellions and revolutions happen all the time in Earth's history, and usually from a far enough vantage point in the future, we can see that they don't solve all the problems. It's not like all the bad guys are defeated, the good guys won, everybody is happy. The good guys invariably usually start making exactly the same mistakes as the previous one, and we have another revolution, you know, a few decades or a few centuries down the line. This is an episode that speaks very much to the rebranding of the, you know, we have a machine that was used for torture, which isn't being used for torture anymore. It's for rehabilitation. You know, we have the kind of wonderful situation where a war criminal is or potential war criminal is allowed to run around, but has to see a therapist every week. You know, there's all those kind of fairly cutting remarks that nobody comes out of this particularly well. You know, the Republic feels like it has a double standard with parties, with people who don't really care, you know, who's ruling as long as the champagne keeps flowing. We have machines being repurposed and rebranded. I didn't come out particularly liking, I love the episode, but I didn't come out particularly liking anybody. They were either weak or duplicitous. And I think probably that's a quite realistic thing that happens after any revolution.
Kyle, I want to get your thoughts on Elia Kane here, because it ends up to this mind flayer that she sets up Dr. Penn Pershing. And whenever there's any type of mind thing going on here, whether it's the Winter Soldier getting reprogrammed, or it's Dr. Mindbender / Venom's G.I. Joe brain scanner, you know, I went really deep with that one, by the way. It's never ends up good, especially when you've got a control where you can turn it up to 11. But I want your thoughts on Elia Kane, Kyle.
Well, at least here they're using in technology, unlike in Wrath of Khan, where they were using creepy bugs. I'm just going to say that first of all.
These guys are not creepy. They are really cute. See that?
Yeah, take it away. Take it away. So Elia Kane, I just have this sneaking suspicion. This is just going with gut feeling. I think she's still working for our good friend Moff Gideon. And I think she's executing some orders he probably had in place before he was taken into custody if this, and this happened. So I think one of the things was he knew he had to get the good doctor off the board, or at least his knowledge off the board. and this was the opportunity to do so. And yeah, I think this is where we're going to see a little hubris on the New Republic's part, that their redeeming program isn't quite as going to be redeeming as people like to think it is, because there still seem to be a lot of Empire love things going on with a lot of these guys.
By the way, when I was standing next to Katie O'Brien, I just want to let you know she didn't give any spoilers to this episode. I was a little disappointed finding out later. She could have spoiled something because she was drinking. I think so.
That was the mind flare she put you through later in the evening, Kevin.
Yeah, definitely connected probably to Moff Gideon because of what they said at the table there, like he possibly escaped. But I would also like to see another warlord in the picture, someone either within, maybe also helping, because someone else has to be helping Katie's character as well, Elia Kane. I would like to, and especially since Bo-Katan referred to other warlords that apparently she's pissed off. And this I like the idea of warlords because in the original now Legends books, there was always outside of the original story of Thrawn, there was other warlords that our heroes had to deal with that were out in the Outer Rim trying to pull their own power sources with their own weapons and trying to have their own little enclaves and keep the Imperial might alive. And so I kind of like this idea that there's other warlords out there. And I think that that's really cool. So, all right, Kyle, what do we got next?
I think we need to talk about our favorite redheaded Mandalorian, Bo-Katan. She might be keeping some secrets, Kevin.
This is true. All right, guys, let's get into some Bo-Katan Kryze here because we've learned some things here. Din has been redeemed, and Bo-Katan is now part of the clan family. Is she accepting this in her heart? Is she finding herself now? Is she finding that this is the way, or does she have something else deeper going on? A long game, so to speak. And John, I really want to get your thoughts on this because she saw the big, mythosaur, didn't say anything about it. She kept her helmet on. She doesn't have a house anymore, So your thoughts on what's happening with Bo? What do you think?
I mean, it was good to see Bo in the episode. I'm not sure we saw Katie Sackhoff anywhere in the episode, but it was just saying. But it's interesting. I mean, I think she was pretty much seeing herself as a taxi service. It was just like, yeah, okay, I'll take you back to these people that you seem to be so impressed with, and I'll come along with you and see you and say hi, and I'll be then on my way. I'll be in the back. I'll have a drink. I'll catch up with you when you've mingled later. I don't think she had any interest in sort of like being redeemed. And when somebody basically said, "Do you want to be his +1?" she was like, yeah, whatever. There was no like, oh yeah, thanks, it was like, oh yeah, okay, that sounds nice, thank you. And then I'll just be in the background thinking about what I was going to go off and do. So it doesn't mean anything to. Doesn't mean anything. I don't think it means anywhere near as much to her character as it does to Din's character. But it will be interesting to see what being accepted back, if she can use that for some things that she wants to do. But I don't anticipate she's going to be sort of like wanting to be kicking back in any cavern at any point. She'd be like, no, I'm going to be off to my ship. I've got a few people to have a chat with about my neighborhood watch after what happened. So I think this is a little detour for her. It was a main event for the Mandalorian, but it's going to be interesting to see what her priorities are now. I think she'll use the fact she's been reaccepted rather than think of it as any really big deal. On the flip side, she did see something that goes to the heart of Mandalore lore. Maybe that's niggling at her a little bit, and maybe we'll see that. But I don't know with this show. I don't know whether that's going to be another arc for her, or it's all going to be sorted out in the first 10 minutes of next week's episode, and it'll be a completely different story thereafter. I don't don't know.
Kyle, I want to get your thoughts on that too, but real quick, Joseph says, y'all forgetting Grogu saying this is the way in the ship. Was he saying this is the way after they said it, or was he saying, I sense TIE fighters coming after you, watch out? He definitely seems like he's starting to talk a lot more, which we find adorable. But what do you think, Kyle? What's going on with Bo?
Can we say ever the opportunist? Bo-Katan has a huge opportunity in front of her that has presented itself. She's keeping the secret of the mythosaur. She is now in the same presence as a nice little fighting force of Mandalorians, and the black saber is accessible to her. And so she's kind of maybe looking back at this going, this is an opportunity. I can get control of the black saber, earn these guys' trust, get them on my side for my ends for Mandalore. Now that we know Mandalore isn't cursed and there's life on Mandalore, Bo-Katan, I'm not saying she's the bad guy, but she's definitely going to be working her angles just like she always has. And there's too many opportunities in front of her right now with this situation for her to at least make an attempt to take an advantage of. And I think that could be a subplot that's going to be running through the rest of the season.
I agree with you, Kyle. And it's funny too, because I found an article that Katie was being interviewed about this episode and what she might be holding, close to her chest, saying that the former Mandalorian leader's intention wasn't nefarious. She said, quote, doesn't trust necessarily what she saw. She might have thought that she imagined it, the actress explained, and that there's so many things that she's trying to process in her head, and I don't necessarily think that it's something that she wants to tell anyone right now. I call BS, Katie Sackhoff. You're just saying the right things right now, okay? I think that you're right, Kyle, and a lot of people have been saying this, that she is holding all the cards right now, but she needs to kind of make friends with the clan here if she wants to make a power play. But I think she's kind of judging the situation too. Are these people the cult that she remembers or that she thinks they are? Has there been any evolution? Plus, there's the Mandalorian card too, because he knows her side as well. But keeping all of these cards to herself and playing them at the right time, I think, is going to present itself into some interesting episodes. She could make the power play and go, hey, I'm going to go get that mythosaur. I'm going to ride it. I'm going to show these Mandalorians this is what was supposed to happen, and I can now challenge for the dark saber, which she can handle better than Din. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff in play here. But Katie, thank you for saying the PC answer, but I'm not buying it.
I just like to say it's some of the mythological aspects of it, which I think keep tripping the series up. I mean, on one hand, Mandalore is this sacred place that nobody can ever get back to because it's poisoned, and we walk into it in 10 minutes and find out the neighborhood's certainly gone down the pits, but it's not radioactive. It's not it's not that big. We got to those waters pretty easily. A few more locks aside. On the other side of it, she's been waving around a dark saber. Now, I am not the biggest, mythological side, but my understanding was you could only have that if you defeated the person who had it. Now, as far as I can tell, if she's going to be using it at all, she technically kind of did that last episode, so that should be the end of that little bit of the equation. There's always, you can't take off your helmet. How the hell are you going to eat? I mean, there was that sort of thing last week where, he was like and sipping it up, which makes it ridiculous.
Apparently the Mandalorians are on a water diet, John, so I don't know, juice diet, maybe. I don't know.
It's one of those things that looks great on paper. Oh, they have this mandate, and this law where they must never do this. And then every single episode, something comes up narrative wise to make that actively ridiculous. And if you almost make an exception every week, then stop introducing the tenets, that they live by. If it's impossible to do that on screen, just like make it more simple. They can never take their helmet off in public. There we go. Thank you. I've just, that's solved that problem. The dark saber can only be willingly given to somebody else. Okay, that sorted that out. It's not as if they are setting up something to be subverted and explained on a narrative way. It's more like they're writing an episode and somebody forgets, and they then have to make an explanation of how that fits in. Stop introducing all these mythological stuff if you can't keep to it.
Yep, good point.
Kevin, I'm just going to throw this out real quick too. I think we are going to have a throwdown at some point this season between Bo-Katan and a certain armorer. I have a feeling.
Yeah, or the other Mandalorian who is questioning everything from everyone. The very big Mandalorian that's voiced by John Favreau, but's got a really tiny head. Because his family has clashed with Clan Kreese before, so I'm wondering if that's going to be brought to the surface. So yeah.
Well, that is going to wrap up our talk on Mando Watch 2023 for this week. Of course, we'll be back next week to discuss Mando Watch, the next episode of The Mandalorian. But we aren't done yet because we have John Mosby here, which means it's time to talk a little Last of Us and talk a little bit about your proper fungus grooming.
Okay, I got a quick question though for you, John. This may not
Yes.
be quick, but I need you to answer it. Okay. Let's take our two fandoms here of The Last of Us and the Immortals of Highlander. How would this pandemic affect Immortals, and would it?
Start with the heavy questions.
I mean, can you imagine Duncan cruising around in his his Thunderbird, and maybe he's got bitten, but he's not infected. But then Tess all of a sudden starts flipping out on him. I mean, or Connor walking down New York, and then all of a sudden people start coming out and going, "Wah!"
Yeah. Oh, I mean, now what people are going to pick me up on this because what was established. Oh, now I'm going full nerd. What was established, wasn't it, in the Raven, was that a poison can kill a pre-immortal if it kills him quick enough for immortality not to kick in. So the question would be for an existing immortal, I'm guessing that he would have a really bad hair day, but probably I don't know. It would certainly stop somebody becoming an immortal. I have a feeling that those wonderful complexions probably wouldn't work. The Cordip virus, and again, going full nerd on here, is one that attacks the brain. So can you imagine a fungus in control of an immortal body?
Oh,
that would be a whole thing.
So,
and if David Abramowitz is watching this, I'll share that the writing credit.
Go, David.
So here's the thing, because I don't know if the fungus would actually. The question would be is if the immortal dies from the fungus, does the fungus die with the immortal, or does the fungus stay alive long enough that when the immortal revives, the fungus is still there and just right back in control again? I think that's probably the conundrum there is, does the fungus just keep the mortal alive? But the problem is the mortal, it's kind of like the guy he's trapped in his body, but not behind the driver's seat.
This sounds like a situation where if an immortal was in a metal coffin at the bottom of the ocean and keeps drowning over and over again, that's where I think we're at.
Yeah.
I have not drunk enough to answer that question.
All right. I had to throw it out there because it's always fun when you think about these pandemic zombie situations. How would immortal
this amount of vodka, and then I'll get back to you.
Oh, that's gonna be a fun podcast. But let's talk about the episodes we are talking about here, because we are in the last 3 episodes of this phenomenal first season of The Last of Us. Season 1, episode 7, Kevin, is Left Behind. This is a very intriguing episode because this was actually a lot of the things in this episode were a DLC, which was a downloadable content add-on to the Last of Us game.
Mm-hmm.
So
I have to take your word for it because I hadn't played the game.
Yeah, but it is one of the aspects that makes it more interesting. If you don't mind, Kevin, I'll go into the plot real quick.
Yeah, please.
So Ellie and an injured Joel shelter in an abandoned house. As Joel approaches death, he urges Ellie to leave him. Ellie remembers her time in Vedra Military School, where she attended with her best friend Riley. While Ellie causes trouble and fights with her peers, Riley ran away and has been missing for 3 weeks. Riley sneaks back into their dorm room and reveals to Ellie she has joined the Fireflies. She brings Ellie to an abandoned mall where they explore a photo booth, an arcade, and a carousel. Riley tells Ellie that The Fireflies have assigned her to a post in Atlanta, and it is her last night in Boston. Ellie is upset, but convinces Riley to stay, and they kiss. An infected attacks, and the two, and Ellie kills them. Both are bitten during the struggle. Cheerfully, they decide to stay together and wait for the infection to take hold, while in the present, Ellie finds a sewing needle and stitches Joel's wound. Now, the thing about this episode was, I remember when this DLC content came out, it was very emotional for a lot of people because we really saw a side of Ellie we hadn't really seen. And John, I'm just going to ask you real quick: do you feel like this episode really nailed that content? Because I think they did a phenomenal job with it.
Yeah, I mean, there was sometimes The Last of Us takes things and expands them out. It didn't really need to expand this out a lot. There was a few bits that from memory, that it added to a little bit or just swapped them a little bit. But generally, if you played the game, the DLC Left Behind, and you watch this, I think inarguably they're very much the same animal. I thought, I mean, I was just amazingly impressed with the production value of this. What I understand is that a lot of what we see is not a traditional set. They actually took over an abandoned shopping mall that was about to be demolished a few months later, and were allowed to film in there, dress it up as they want. When you're shooting in situ and you've got two intense performances, I think everything came together. So it was one of those times when they were able to look at what the game did and say, not only can we reproduce that, we can broaden it out just a little bit, both visually and emotionally, but tell the same story without having to build, $1 million sets that would be prohibitive. So yeah, I think it's exactly what people might have expected, which is not always what people expect. But yeah, I thought generally it was a great version of the DLC.
Kevin, I want to ask you, because a lot of people who had played the game and stuff were hyping this as a pretty emotional episode. You haven't played the game, you haven't messed with the DLC. This episode had a couple of things that I've talked to some people who hadn't played the game. They had some questions for me on, but I'm curious, what were your initial thoughts on this episode? Did you feel like it kind of took you out? Some people said that to me that it kind of took them out of what was going on. I think it actually helped us understand Ellie a lot more.
Agreed completely. Didn't take me out at all. I thought that that's the brilliance of this show, is that not only are you getting what's happening here, you'll get these flashbacks that then start to fill in the character development of these people that we like, and also some plot points that we're kind of curious about. And Ellie had talked about how she had killed someone before, and we didn't quite know the situation, and we didn't know the situation of her bite. And so this lays that groundwork. And as John mentioned too, that wonderful set that they overtook a mall that was going to be destroyed. They were, I think it was funny about how they had to bring like all these typical mall stores that might not have been in this mall yet, that they were about to break down or tear down. I thought that was kind of cool. And by the way, before I forget, if you have HBO Max and you're watching this, make sure you go check out right after the last episode dropped, which we'll be getting to later. They released a 30-minute behind the scenes making of this show. And they talk about that mall and a bunch of other things too in the different episodes. And it was a great behind the scenes thing. But yeah, Kyle, this definitely was a great episode to learn more about Ellie, because she is the key to this. And seeing that she gets bit, her friend gets bit, and although really don't see what happens to her friend and how she dies, we know what's going to happen. So yeah.
Oh, that was the other quick question I had for you about this episode, Kevin, because I know the fact that it kind of ends, it's ambiguous how it ends, because we don't really see what happens. So we're basically left open to speculation. Some people like that. Even in the game, it does this. Some people like that. Some people didn't. But how did you feel about how the episode just kind of ends on that note with that part of the story?
I was fine with it because I had a feeling we would get more into it later, and we did. And it even tied the Fireflies in a little bit too, and how strong they are and how connected they are and influential they are as well. And the struggle there. But I think that really getting inside Ellie's head was the important part here. And I have a picture up here of them in the carousel, and then there's the screenshot from the game as well. And I can only assume that you guys that are fans of the video game are going like, yes, you're getting it right. You're getting it right.
Yeah, most definitely. Speaking of getting it right, let's move on to episode 8 here, because I had forgotten how creepy this portion of the game was, and this episode reminded me greatly. Episode 8, When We Are in Need. Ellie leaves Joel, who is still recovering, to hunt for food. After shooting a deer, she tracks the wounded animal and encounters a preacher, David, and his fellow hunter, James. She trades her deer for penicillin. David reveals the man who stabbed Joel was a member of his group. Ellie leaves to treat Joel. The next day, she discovers David and his men have followed her to seek vengeance on Joel. She flees to draw them away, but is captured. At David's camp, he reveals he has been feeding his group human flesh. Meanwhile, Joel awakens and tortures some of David's men into telling him Ellie's whereabouts. David and James attempt to kill Ellie, but she kills James and escapes. David hunts her down and tries to assault her, but she overpowers him and kills him with a meat cleaver. Joel finds a traumatized Ellie outside the cult's burning community center and comforts her. John, having rewatched this, I actually kind of had forgotten about this part of the game because it had been a while since I played it, but this is this moment, and this moment in the game really feels like this is when we see the big emotional turn between Joel and Ellie really truly happen.
Same as you, that when this episode came up, I was thinking, oh yes, rather than almost everything else in the game, I'm thinking, oh, right, okay, that's that. It's a very powerful part of the game, but weirdly, it's not the one that everybody tends to remember because of the other key moments. But yeah, it was an episode definitely where, and it's very interesting. The previous episode was very much young Ellie, the young girl, who had the experiences of more somebody her age, and now you've got an episode where you almost swung the opposite way. The child that's had to grow up far too quickly, particularly of the events for this episode. We leave them at the end of this episode with a very different Ellie. I think it's a transformative, not necessarily always good, but it's definitely an arc where we've seen every aspect of Ellie over those couple of episodes, going from young to somebody who's had to go very quickly. It's a very good episode. To say that it falls into the kind of tropey side of it, of a cult kind of thing, and there's the cannibal aspect. I was never a huge fan of that in the game, only because it seems to me anybody who's a person of faith in these type of apocalyptic things usually tends to be a psychopathic weirdo. I would like to almost see a series where actually somebody who's quite religious is actually reasonably well balanced. So it felt like it was a little tropey, but having said that, it's a fantastic set of performances within that, which, as you say, creepy with a capital C, and expertly done by everybody involved.
Yeah, Scott Shepherd was phenomenal as David and creeped me the hell out, Kevin.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I had to watch it again. I didn't quite get the cannibalism part at first until she said, "You guys are effing cannibals." And then I had to rewatch it again and go, oh, there's the ear thing. Yeah. Ugh. And then you see the bodies, of course, she sees later on. I thought it was interesting, too, because when you watch these on HBO Max, they have also the little behind the scenes of each episode with the creator talking about him. And Troy Baker, who played James, also, I guess, is the voice of Joel Miller in the video game. And I think that's really cool that they're getting these voice actors who are actors as well to play these parts. I just wondering when he's reading the script going, oh, I get a cleaver to the neck. Nice. But yeah, this is the type of episode that, as us non-video game watchers, lets us know that this world is crap right now. And there's horrible, horrible people that when you look at it, it's like The Walking Dead. The worst things about The Walking Dead are the humans that are still around, not the actual zombies. And this is a perfect example of that. And it scared me, but done really, really well.
Yeah. I will say this: the first hint of it, when you actually would go kind of figure out what's going on, and they go back and they talk. The one child is talking about, well, when can we bury my dad? Well, we can't bury him because you just had him for dinner.
We're eating your dad's toes tomorrow night for dessert.
Yeah.
Be patient, child.
How to love man.
We're all gonna burn. We're all gonna burn. But that leads us into our season 1 finale. Look for the light. In a flashback, Ellie's mother, Anna, is bitten by an infected as she gives birth to Ellie. She is found by Marlene, who hesitantly takes Ellie and kills Anna at the latter's request. In the present, Firefly soldiers capture Ellie and knock Joel unconscious. After Joel awakens in a hospital, Marlene explains doctors are preparing Ellie for surgery to produce a cure, but the procedure will kill her. Marlene orders Joel to be taken away. However, he fights back and kills most of the soldiers and the lead surgeon. Joel finds Ellie and leaves the hospital. Marlene intercepts them, stating there is still time to find a cure, but Joel shoots her and kills her. When Ellie wakes up, Joel lies and tells her the Fireflies had found other immune people and were unable to create a cure. As they hike to Jackson, Ellie expresses survivor's guilt. She insists Joel swear his story about the Fireflies is true. She verbally accepts his words. Guys, this was a phenomenal season finale. I just want to do a quick shout out to you, Kevin. You've talked about how they are including the voice actors in this. Ashley Johnson, who was the voice of the original Ellie, plays Ellie's mom in this. But many of us might remember her with her debut as a young Kirk Cameron's younger sister on Growing Pains. I just have to get that 80s reference in.
I saw that pop up on social media, and I didn't remember that because it's been so long since I've watched that TV series. But one of my it's kind of a guilty pleasure. Mel Gibson's What Women Want, where he can understand what women are thinking. And Ashley plays his daughter in that. And then you and I were kind of going back and forth on this, John. More recently, though, she was in Avengers. She was the waitress that Captain America saved, and you see her interviewed as well.
No, absolutely. She's a phenomenal actress. She's appeared in so many things that you end up going, oh my god! You'll catch them online, catch them on reruns and whatever, and you'll go, wait a second, that's Ashley Johnson, or that's so and so. I love the fact that a lot of these people that seem to have had overnight success have actually been jobbing actors for a decade or more. She's a phenomenal actress. She's done a lot of voice work as well for The Last of Us. But she's one of those things that she keeps popping up in and doing really good small supporting parts. I think she was in Blind Spot. I didn't follow that show, but I think she was a regular in Blind Spot for a while. But yeah, isn't she just the fact of who she's playing and how it's played? It's just an absolute chef's kiss to the existing fans. And even if you've never played a moment of the game, it's a great performance.
I have to ask you though, I didn't quite put it together that this was like, as soon as I saw this for the first time, a part of me actually thought, like, is this a flash forward? Like, does this take place in the future? Is this an older Ellie? And then I started thinking back, well, then who is this? Who's she giving birth to? I didn't catch it right away that this is Ellie's mom until, a little bit later in the scene though. So I don't know if I was the only one that was thinking that, because I hadn't obviously played the video game. So
I think anybody who played the game would have picked it up very quickly. If you haven't played the game, I think that's the whole point of the scene to start off with, that until Marlene arrives and until she gives birth, and then there's the penknife and things like that, then suddenly it's like, oh, click, 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 this is what it is. I think the show kind of throws you in and then explains it, and you go, oh, I get it. I'm clever. I got it. It lets you work it out rather than telling you the present day or 5 years ago or whatever. It says, stick with us. You'll understand this in a few minutes. And I kind of like it when a show does that.
I think it helps too that Ashley Johnson actually looks like she could be Bella Ramsey's mother in real life. They actually have a very similar appearance.
Yeah, they kind of have this little bit of a round face and the high cheekbones. So yeah.
Now, Kevin, you had some questions about this episode, so I want you to be the one to give your thoughts first on this episode, because I know you had a few questions about how some things played out in this episode.
Well, yeah, John, I want to reference your article that you put, of course, on Echo Chamber Online. And I want to talk about Joel's rampage here, because I think this is really important. And this ties into what I didn't really realize at first. But anyway, let me mention what you say here. You said Joel's rampage through the hospital is impressive, not perhaps as intense as, say, the raid, but powered by the urgency of the situation, the emotional investment of character and audience, and also solid editing amid dark corridors and oppressive lighting. Again, for those of us who know the game, it almost feels like it should have lasted longer. Though there's no denying the brutality and emotional core that drives Joel forward. Pascal has never looked more angry or desperate in the show. Joel kills anybody in the way and collects ammunition to face whatever is around the next corner. But through that, he echoes the gameplay of the original. It never feels like you're just playing a game here. By the time Joel gets in the room where the surgery is about to take place, you absolutely know that anyone who would hurt Ellie isn't going to get out of this alive. But it's still unsettling to see Joel murder, and undeniably it is murder, the doctor. As in the game, there's a little indication of just how fateful that decision will prove, and it will be interesting to see if they inform The Last of Us Part 2's reason. I want to ask you, first of all, okay, it took me talking to a coworker, and then I had to kind of sit on this a little bit. Going into this episode, I was not under the impression that Ellie knew that she possibly had to die to go through this procedure and come out of it dead, and that she knew that she was gonna. It's kind of like, Harry Potter came to that decision, like he was going to have to die, and he was prepared to do so. I was under the impression that she was just going to have to give some blood and maybe go through a couple of procedures, and that she was going to be okay. But going into this, you find out that's not the case, especially when they start talking about how everything's connected to the brain, and it clicks in Joel that, the conversation that he's having, of course, with Marlene. Is it Marlene, right? Marlena? Yeah. That no, she's gonna Marlene.
Yeah, Marlene.
Yeah. That she's gonna have to die for this procedure. And that caught me off guard. I actually was a little jolted about that, going, wait a minute. I'm trying to look back at past episodes and think that Ellie knows she has to die, but then I'm thinking like maybe she didn't. She knew it was going to be a procedure. But then Joel recognizes that, yeah, she's being sacrificed here for the greater good, so to speak, especially the way Marlena is looking and discussing this with him. Like, no, you can't see her, take him out to the road, give him his pack and let him go. So you guys know the game, and I don't know what's going to happen, but in the game and in the TV show, is it synonymous that Ellie knows that she has to die? And she knows this, John?
No, not what Kyle was just saying. It's no, and I think the clue about how in the series how she doesn't know is the fact when she tries to cure Sam, says, here's a bit of my blood, see if it works on you, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work that way in real life. Just giving somebody, spraying somebody with a bit of blood doesn't cure them. And I think that kind of shows that she has no real idea herself how her immunity works. The ironic part, I think, of the game, and the only one of the darker parts of the end of the game, is that most of what happens at the end of the game could be avoided. It's almost like choose your own adventure thing. Or this was the worst possible, almost the worst possible path that somebody could have taken. They'd said to Elliot, "Hey, listen, you might have to die for this." She might have said, "Yeah, I'm willing to do that to save humanity." If they hadn't told Joel the reality of it, he probably could have been told that she died on the table. He'd be very, very sad. What they did was not tell the person that they should have done, and did tell the person that they shouldn't have done. I don't think there was any indication that Ellie was aware. In fact, they do say that line that they tried to spare her, the fear, which is a pretty superficial thing to say. It's, I think she deserved to know that. But yeah, it was almost the worst possible scenario that threads that needle. But Ellie had no. I don't think. I think Kyle would back me up on this. I don't think in either the game or the series she has any idea.
No, I agree with everything John just said, and I agree that she had no idea, and I think that was intentional to be a plot twist of the game. And it also, because you're talking about the desperation of saving humanity, you're talking about people who aren't thinking about this girl, they're thinking about the greater good and saving humanity. But with the Fireflies too, you kind of wonder if there was, okay, we'll get this cure, but what's going to be the price to give the cure? They're not necessarily, and like I said, it's an evil that needs to be done to save the greater good. And truthfully, I think what they thought was, this is just a child. She's not going to understand. She's not going to know. So we're just not going to give her the respect she does. And they didn't say anything to Joel because of his attachment to Ellie. I think the series and the game would have been both very interesting if Joel knew ahead of time. This is what was going to happen. And maybe somewhere along the line, Ellie finds out that way and has to make that decision. But it's one of the more powerful moments in the game when you realize the truth, and especially too when you're talking about the ending where Joel does basically this in a way the same thing the Fireflies do to Ellie and takes away her choice by lying to her. And so it's an interesting little thing that happens with all of that there.
And I know Kyle and I are both picking. I can see Kyle there picking his words so carefully because of Kevin has played any game, and there's various people watching who don't know stuff that happens later on. But there are just so many consequential decisions made in this episode that either immediately have an effect or have an effect down the when we get to them some point in the next couple of seasons, where we were having this conversation again and having it in a very different way with all the complex things that happen, and can't be any more circumspect than that. But yeah, there was so many. It's interesting. I don't know if you felt it's kind of watching this episode play out. Part of your brain is going like, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. Or do that. Why don't you do that? And as people who've played the game, it's almost a different experience from the people who are watching the series for the first time, equally invested, but perhaps in a different way.
The thing that bugs me regarding what Marlene did is, first of all, they flashbang grenade them, right? And then Marlene is talking to Joel saying, "You're not the man I would have trusted to do this," because it's Anna Torv's character. What was her character's name again?
Tess.
Okay. Basically gives the mission to him, and so it's like, her tactics are kind of unsettling as it is, and that she says, how did you do this, and how did you get her here? And he goes, well, it was Ellie. It's all her. She has this strength, and she's looking at him going, no, I know you had a lot to do with it, because I know the type of person you are. You're the ultimate protector, and you can kill anything and anyone to make sure that happens. That's what I'm thinking that she's thinking. But her tactics just were, I think, as I'm sure that you guys are watching, knowing what happens and what is probably going to happen, are just setting off these little alarms inside of Joel's head. And as a viewer, I'm just watching this conversation going, you don't get to see her. And we found out there's this procedure, and we're gonna be able to, but we have to take it out or do whatever. And then Joel's putting one and one together, like that's connected to the brain. And then she kind of gives that look like, yeah, she's gonna have to die for this. And I'm going, oh geez, and then when Joel starts being escorted down the stairs, I'm like, he's gonna make his move. And I did not expect him to go full on John Wick on everyone, seriously. But it was an amazing, there's a great scene in a Chow Yun-Fat movie called Hard Boiled, where he is going through a nonstop camera motion shootout through this hospital. And I was getting flashbacks to that. And you wrote that scene out very well inside your article, John, of like, there's nothing that can stop this guy, and he knows how to, pick up more guns and ammunition.
It's one of those. It's one of the things that I mentioned. It felt like it should longer. It lasts longer in the game because it's incredibly hard to get through. And I don't know anybody who spent less than in 3 or 4 days worth of constantly to get through it. It's difficult. So therefore, it feels like it goes quicker in the game, in the episode. I'd like to have seen the episode a little longer. It sounds awful, and I would like to have seen a good 10 minutes of him going through the hospital. In effect, or at least something that felt like 10 minutes going through the hospital to show how difficult it was. We know he's an unstoppable machine when it comes to this. But it did feel like bang, it felt like taking on stormtroopers. Bang, you're dead. Bang, you're dead. Bang, you're dead. Right. I would like to have seen him not almost get shot, but feel how difficult it is, even though he's an unstoppable force. That's the only problem I have with the episode. When you get to that, it feels a little bit fast.
I got to ask you guys this. Okay, this has been a hot topic. At the end, we know that he lies to her, basically, straight up lies to her about what really happened. But you get the feeling that she knows he's lying. Is she not saying anything because she knows that he's doing this for a reason, and that he said he knows that she wants her to make that choice for herself, and that even though he's not telling me the truth here, I know that I'm safe with him? What do you think, John?
I mean, that's it. There's so many interpretations of it. I don't think she necessarily wants the answer. I think she needs to ask. But if he turned around and given her the truth, which would be the honorable thing to do, I don't know if that's the truth she'd want to hear, because she'd feel a bit responsible for it, more than a bit responsible for it. So I think she asked the question. I think he lies for good reasons. The question, when you put that question in, you turn the question around. What would you do in that situation? Would you tell the truth or not? He made a decision. He's living with it. I don't think he wants her to have the burden. He saved her. She didn't have to make a sacrifice. She shouldn't have to carry that burden around with her. She should never know that she could have saved the world. How would you carry around that? I could have saved the entire world, and I didn't, and you took that choice from me. Some of Joel is self-serving. He doesn't want to have that conversation. But I don't know if Ellie particularly wants to have either. It's certain that she doesn't believe him completely. But I don't think she knows quite what to be, and it's more comfortable not to know the future.
The bigger question, I'm sure you guys can answer this or have an idea because you've played the game, but as a viewer, I'm like, where are they going now? We know season 2 is coming, but where the hell are they going now if they're not going to do this procedure? Are they going back to his brother's place? So it's fascinating that all the stuff that it makes you think and rethink and reevaluate. That's why the show's so great. Kyle.
To kind of answer your question, that's the big mystery right now, because yes, it has officially been renewed for season 2, but there are a lot of rumors out there. Not only is it renewed for season 2, HBO has every intent to renew it for a 3rd season, which means to me that I think they're either going to take the second game and break it up into 2 seasons, or HBO and Naughty Dog are working together to add additional stories to The Last of Us that will fill a time gap between the first game and the second game. Because, John, what is it? It's a 5-year jump, isn't it?
It's a 5-year jump. I don't think it's a big spoiler to say that we pick up the second game back in Wyoming with Tommy and everybody else like that. But we don't know. But we have flashbacks to against other stuff that may have happened, did happen during those 5 years. But there is the various reasons, and Carol, you'll understand this, why I don't want to rush into season, the game 2, part 2. The second season. There is a 5-year gap that's only partly filled in with the games. I think there's a huge, massive, and quite pragmatic opportunity to fill in some of that before we get to some of the pivotal events of the second game. If they go too quickly into that second game, I don't think it's going to work out necessarily that well for HBO. I think they need to keep building that, drop elements in from the game, but have them happen at a slower pace. Maybe get towards some of the more pivotal things at the end of the second season, and still work flashbacks for a third season. That's the way I do it, and I can't see any other way that would be pragmatic. But certainly there are gaps to tell lots of stories, and bringing some of the back, they've done really well with this season, bringing some of the motivations, the bigger factors, some smaller characters, bring them forward. There's huge potential here. I really hope they don't waste that opportunity.
Yeah, I don't think they will. It's going to be interesting to see the directions that they're going to take. Real quick, before we wrap up our Last of Us conversation, I just want to, Kevin, you mentioned that making of special. There was one moment in there that I absolutely loved. They're interviewing Pedro, and he was talking about getting ready to audition for the role and how he was talking to his sister and his nephews were in the car and he was on speakerphone. And before he could even get the last out there, his nephews were like, "The Last of Us? You can't screw this up." he's like, I guess I got to take the role then.
Yeah.
So, no, the series one is absolutely phenomenal. Go ahead, John.
I'd to say that everybody I speak to seems to be hugely invested in it. Two teachers I work with, Laura and Jerome, both kind of got me on Monday and said, "What did you think of this? What do you think?" And we had really long discussion about it. And I will say one thing as well. Again, no spoilers, but what a lot of people noticed in the final episode was that Laura Bailey, who's voiced a lot of the characters in several characters in the games, both 1 and 2, played one of the nurses in that final sequence with the doctor. Now, and Kyle will know what I mean with this. This is not a pretext that Laura Bailey, who voiced another character in the second game, was playing an earlier version of that character. But it was an interesting thing that Laura Bailey, who, as I say, has done so many characters, did have a little cameo in that. You won't notice it in the credits, but she was one of the nurses. I love those little attentions to details that fans can dissect if they know the original game.
Yeah, no, good point, John. Of course, Kevin, Last of Us is an HBO series, so which means we won't see season 2 until about 2026?
Yeah, something like that.
Well, guys, before we wrap up real quick, I just want to do a quick hit on the Oscars. They happened this weekend. It was actually, the Oscars were everything, everywhere, all at once. Not only that, because it got basically the sweep of every major category it could. It really did not have anything for leading actor, but I think we can all live with the fact that Brendan Fraser won for The Whale. I think that makes everybody in fandom's heart happy to see him getting those accolades. But Kevin, one of the things that came out of this Oscars was a very heartwarming moment for all Indiana Jones fans out there.
Yeah, Ke Huy Quan, of course, played Short Round in Indy 2, and the Oscar was given to him. Of course, was it at the end? Was it at the end of it when they won Best Movie? Was that what it was? I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
Or yeah. Anyway, it was a really nice moment, and the history between them. But my favorite moment was, and I caught it right away, was when Key was giving his acceptance speech, and he shouted out Joel. What's his name? The guy that played Chunk, basically, and he called him out as his.
Now. Yeah.
What's that?
No, I just don't spoil your story about how he factors into him involved in the movie.
Yeah, and he's his entertainment lawyer as well, if I read correctly, and that they've been partners and stuff for a while, and I thought that was great. But John, your thoughts on the Oscars here?
Yeah, here's the weird thing: we were talking about The Last of Us, and now we're talking about the Oscars. We were both on at the same time. It was interesting that they moved The Last of Us from the Super Bowl, but didn't feel the need to move it from being opposite the Oscars. Interesting to know how many people decided not to watch the Oscars and watch the Last of Us instead.
That was me.
That was me. Yeah. To be honest, I'm a bona fide professional film critic for many, many years, and I haven't. Two sides of my brain. One was going, "This is one of the most interesting Oscars to see who wins what in many years," and the other half of me was shrugging slightly, going, but do I have to sit through 3.5 hours of it? I'm glad that everything everywhere at once won. I'm not as big a fan of that film as a lot of people I know, but I think it's lovely when something that's completely different from anything else wins, that doesn't follow a template. So more power to that. I can't fault many of the awards. I thought most of them were worthy. It was interesting sometimes to see who won. But it was. I thought it was a good roundup of awards. I care less and less for awards nowadays. Maybe I'm just getting very old and very cynical, despite my youthful looks. But it's interesting to see who wins award. But I tend to take it as a whole thing now, as in not just Oscars, but Golden Globes, the SAG Awards, the BAFTAs. It's interesting to kind of see what trends there are, rather than necessarily to always sit through a very long, self-congratulatory ceremony. I can almost see in the next day who won now. I used to be sitting the whole night. Now, not so much.
Kyle, I just want to say I was in a similar situation with John on this too. Was I had watched, my wife and I actually had watched this movie last year, and we were both kind of tired and fatigued when we went into it, and it went a little longer than we expected, and we both walked away from it going, it's okay, interesting concept, but why is everyone talking about this? And then it wins the award. I'm wondering, like, maybe I need to watch this again. But what's really funny is I was still really tired because I'd gotten up extra early because of the time change, and I ended up taking a long nap, and I completely forgot about the Oscars because all I wanted to do was watch the season finale of Last of Us, and my clocks, I didn't change. And so I woke up going, oh, wait a minute, it's not 6 o'clock. It's actually another time. But I was able to watch it on demand, and I'm watching it, and all of a sudden my phone's blowing up going, oh, this Oscar won, this Oscar. I'm like, holy crap, the Oscars are on. And I'm like, there's no way I'm watching that tonight.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are in that boat.
No, I was just going to say, on one hand, you have the opportunity to watch people, beat each other up and get very asked over emotions, and on the other was lost.
Yeah.
So.
Well,
Keep joking. So I apologize.
Yeah. Just real quick too, I would be remiss if I didn't say how happy I am for Michelle Yeoh winning an Oscar. She's had a phenomenal career, and I love seeing that.
And Brendan Fraser too,
Yeah, I mean, and Jamie Lee Curtis winning, even though I was rooting for Angela Bassett because I thought she was phenomenal. She was the most phenomenal part of Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. But Jamie Lee Curtis, it's a lifetime. I think this was kind of one of those people winning their lifetime achievement Oscar, but it wasn't quote unquote the lifetime achievement Oscar.
I'll flip that a little bit. I thought Angela Bassett, I think, is a fantastic actor, and I think she's a stellar performer. And there's some nice moments in the Black Panther Wakanda Forever, but at no point until the buzz started going did I think it was going to be anywhere near an Oscar nominated thing. I never thought she was going to win until maybe she started getting the cascade of awards. She's perfectly good in it. It's a good role. I love her career. It's not in close to anything, the best thing she's ever done there.
I agree with that.
I want to go back to the Jamie Lee Curtis thing. The thing that I loved about her speech was she thanked all of the people for watching her genre films. Translation, thank you, horror fans, for tuning in. Yeah. And I thought that was really, really cool. And of course, I loved her in True Lies and many other stuff, Fish Called Wanda. She was good in this movie, but I'm glad she won it because she could have gotten it for some other stuff. So I'm just saying.
Yeah. Real quick, guys, before we head out, Kevin, you did a little quick double feature matinee the other day. Just a little quick buy it, stream it, or unsee it. You did 60. You saw 65 and Creed 3. Just give us your quick buy it, stream it, or unsee it grades here.
I went to see 65 because it was only an hour and a half, and I was curious about it. And basically, I don't want to spoil too much, but Adam Driver plays a human who lands on Earth 65 million years ago. and there's a young girl that survives the crash with him, and they basically have to deal with dinosaurs at that time, and they showcase some other dinosaurs, which is kind of cool. But the thing that I found fascinating about this film is the exact time they arrive and what happens, and the other reason why they have to get off the planet. So I just want to say I was actually, it was fun. If you want to spend a little adventure time for an hour and a half, see it. Otherwise, definitely stream it. And obviously, I thought Creed 3 was a good successor to the last 3. And Jonathan Majors so much better in this movie than he was in Ant-Man. And you kind of see it in the trailer that he's coming back because he spent prison, because he did the prison time because of what happened, kind of covering for Adonis Creed's issue that he had, and he kind of got him out of it, and he wants some payback, and he wants his time in the ring, which he felt was stolen from him. Really well directed, by the way. I'm going to say, of course, by Michael B. Jordan, and the performances were great. And I just want to give a shout out to Tess. What's her name that plays the wife?
Thompson.
Yeah, she was fantastic in this. So this one's definitely a C, and definitely, if you don't see it in the theater, then definitely stream it.
Are we sure this wasn't a Marvel movie? Because Michael B. Jordan, Tessa Thompson, and Jonathan Majors have all been in Marvel films. So
this is true. But this was much better than Ant-Man.
let me ask you this just real quick: is it Jonathan Majors' world, and we're all just living in it?
I don't know. That remains to be seen. But I was more impressed with the trailer to Creed 3 than I was his performance as Kang in Ant-Man and the Quantumania thing. So I gave my thoughts on that.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you, John Mosby, for joining us to talk The Last of Us and Mandalorian. I know this has been a little bit longer episode. We'll get back to more of our usual times for Culture Clash Live, Mando Watch 2023 when we return next week. It's The Last of Us, and we don't want the fungus off. It's just not. We have some down in the basement, and then we just leave it alone in its corner, and it stays happy. But guys, thank you so much for watching. John, real quick, where can people find you on social media?
Yeah, echochamber.online is the main website. I'm There Goes the Day on Twitter, and it's just normal old me, John Mosby, on Facebook. So you can find me one place or another.
Thanks again for coming on, John. We really appreciate you, man. Love your insight. Love nerding out with you.
Always a pleasure.
Absolutely a pleasure. Always have you on. Yep. Of course, if you're watching live, thank you so much for being part of the show and contributing tonight. Remember to subscribe, like, and share out the Fandom Podcast Network YouTube channel. Of course, you can also find all of our audio podcasts and all your major podcast catchers, including our homepage at fpnet.podbean.com. Of course, we're on the Podbean app. Also, can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our iHeartRadio, so many others. Check out our Facebook group, Fandom Podcast Network. Email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram at Fandom Podcast Network or on Twitter at FanPod Network. I am Kyle. You can find me on Twitter at AKyleW or on Instagram at AKyleFandom. Kevin, where can people find you?
Obviously on Facebook, and also on Twitter and Instagram at Spartan_Phoenix.
Again, thank you guys so much for joining us. And as always, remember, respect each other, and most importantly, enjoy your fandom. And just a quick shout out. Get well soon, Mom. I know you're under some bad stuff right now. I'm thinking of you, and I love you. For now, take care, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Buy it, stream it,